Having said that, when you want to do something, you do it. But you also have to be brave enough. I think a lot of creatives maybe struggle with their self-confidence.
Yeah.
And it's not easy. For me and you, it might be normal now to put out content that strangers on the other side of the world can enjoy.
Yeah.
But when you're starting off, it's not.
Yeah.
It's not. It's surreal. Like, have you ever stopped and wondered, looking at your downloads, how is someone in a different country listening to my content?
Yeah, I think, for sure. I do stop to smell the flowers occasionally, and stuff like that is...
Does it make you nervous?
It's crazy to me. Nervous, yeah, kind of. But maybe it's a bit of excitement as well.
It makes me nervous.
The potential, yeah.
Nervous. Like earlier I said to you, I didn't know what downloads were when I first started my podcast.
Yeah, of course.
And now we're literally almost at 60,000 downloads. And it almost scares me.
Yeah.
Because I'm like, hold on, how might this potentially, humbly speaking, change my life?
Yeah, of course.
Because I always think to myself, will there be a time where I make the podcast and all of a sudden everything is being scrutinized and criticized and I'm getting feedback left, right and center, and how is my brain going to commute with that? So as you've gotten bigger and more successful, you obviously get more feedback.
Yeah.
And now what you do is not just a representation of Matt Wilde, but the label you represent, correct?
Yeah, well, I've worked with different labels. I'm not currently signed.
You're not currently signed?
In the traditional format where I have like a long-term relationship with a record label. So far, I've worked with different labels on a project-by-project basis.
Bring a different pressure?
Yeah. I think so. It's like a credibility or something. I don't know. Yeah, I want to make the best music possible, which is not always easy, when you've got like different priorities, or not priorities, but when you've got you're managing and juggling lots of different aspects of the music creation that aren't just music.
How does having a label, or does having a label, change the way you make music?
Fundamentally, no. Actually, no, I don't think so. Because I think it could do in like more, I guess, like the pop genre, or in other genres. And I think there's the genre I'm kind of involved in. Actually, whilst it is increasing with editorial playlists that prioritize easy listening music. And so I'm seeing a lot of growth over the last few years because of, Spotify and Apple Music playlists that prioritize things like, music to game to, or lo-fi beats, or jazz beats, or whatever it is. Yeah, I think I've not signed any deals that compromise sort of my creativity. So I'd say it doesn't really.
Okay.
I think working with record labels establishes like credibility, and you also have when you work with a record label, like even like an independent record label, you've got someone who's championing your work and someone who's advocating for you, and I think that is the benefit.
Well, your success is their success.
Right.
Having said that, is there more accountability? Are there deadlines? Are there numbers that have to be met? Like, Matt, if we're going to fund your next project, we want a certain turnover. We want you to be a certain level of popular download numbers. Yeah.
So I think deadlines, yes. Lots of ideas around content and number of pieces of content and scheduling that content around a campaign, which actually to me, I can see the program, so to speak, and I just run the program. So if I get a spreadsheet and it's like, we need all of these assets on different days, I'm happy to just create them in the best interest of the project. And I'll just try and have fun doing that. So I can just run the program. That's something that I can do. But in terms of criteria, in terms of like popularity or monthly listeners or whatever it is, I've not been there yet, but who knows, maybe in the future.
Your listening streams have hit 7 figures though.
Yeah.
How does that
figures.
feel?
Damn.
I think they have.
Yeah.
I can pretty much guarantee that, because I was doing my research on you and I was on Spotify, and I definitely think you've cracked 7 figures. And if not, we're manifesting it right now.
Exactly. Yeah. So, I mean, on Spotify, streams, every year they do like a Spotify Wrapped. I don't know if you saw that.
Yes, 1.3. I don't want to get this wrong, Matt,
Yeah, go
but amazingly, your numbers were very high.
Yeah.
I remember.
Yeah.
I mean, it makes sense. 10, 15 years in the industry.
Yeah, but only releasing work for 2 years,
Wow.
So that seems like a quick come up, I guess. But, all the work that came before, and then I launched at a point where...
Isn't it that they say that you work 90% of the time for that 10% of success?
Yeah, something like that.
I mean,
think
it makes
truth,
sense.
There's truth in that.
I mean, Robert Greene, who probably my favorite author, says that there's 10,000 hours. I think you've surpassed 10,000 hours, haven't you?
I know, 100%.
Yeah.
Yeah, I guess in the entirety of the different elements, like
from A to Z.
Like for sure. In terms of music production, on the piano, pushing 10 hours, probably more.
You've forgotten more great music than most people have even learned. Does that make sense?
That does make sense.
As a metaphor.
That sometimes gets me because like I'll learn something on the piano, and then I will forget it.
Okay, but I just spotted something here. So you've started releasing your own music through as Matt Wilde on labels or platforms for 2 years.
Yeah.
Prior to that, how was Matt being a musician? Were you selling beats to people?
I've never done that. I have collaborated and given beats to people, so to speak, but I made a lot of mistakes, like I would just throw beats to people who asked for them, and especially if I like their music. Is
that a bad business model though?
That's a bad business model. Yeah, the teenage me made a lot of mistakes, where, so I would always think, right, I'm not going to sell you a beat, but
why?
If I like your music, then let's work together. And so, I guess just because I wasn't really thinking about it, I was just like, it was like the love of the music. It was like, let's create beautiful music. Let's create really good art.
What I'm trying to understand is, if it's not too personal, how do you at that time, if you're not putting out your own music, if you're not on a record label, how are you making ends meet?
Different ways. So like, I'm thinking like when I was 16, let's say, so that's early in the journey where I started collaborating with rappers and MCs and other people. So I would often like record in the spare room at my mum's house. Like, well, I say the spare room, it was actually my bedroom. It's like a small room. That's where I'd record people, and I wasn't charging for that, and so like I wasn't making money doing that, but what I was doing was I was DJing a lot. So I started DJing in different places, and I would get, decent fees for that. At least at the time it felt like that. And then I was also working like retail jobs. I was, doing a bit of freelance work.
When did you start charging for beats?
I guess I've never charged for beats even to this day.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, even to this day. I think that's a certain business model that works for some people. But for me today, I'll just only take on a collaboration if it makes sense musically and in terms of my schedule. And now, what I didn't do back then is just be upfront with the artist and talk about splits.
What do you mean by splits?
So when you make a record or a song, you have 100%. Let's say the song has 100%.
So ownership, 100% ownership.
100% ownership. Let's say we wrote the song together.
50-50.
Yeah, but not always, So like, I like to work 50-50. I think it aligns with my values. So when you make a record, you can assign it like 100% in terms of ownership. If you work on that track with other people or that project with other people, you can split it in different ways. So let's say we work on something, we could say 50-50. Not always, to be fair. Sometimes you might allocate 10% to someone, depending on their contributions. I like to go 50-50 because I like the projects that I work on with other people to be equitable in terms of like bringing the music to life. And then there are other splits that are allocated. So if you work with a record label, they will take royalty percentages. And so I wasn't doing that in my early career. I wasn't asking those questions.
For me, this brings up a lot of questions. How do you keep track of that 50%? And where do you keep track of it? So I'm a rapper, you're the music producer.
Yeah.
50-50 is the deal.
Yeah.
How do you get 50% of the revenue from an album sale, a download? How does that work logistically? And then how do you keep me on track to make sure I give you 50-50 when I go on tour or when I do a live performance, because that was still your beat?
Yeah, I mean, that second half is harder to track. I think basically what this relies on is like honesty and trust. So the artists that we've collaborated with, or that I've collaborated with, there are so many hoops to jump through in the music game that, for example, you have to make sure the song is registered on different platforms that collect royalties. Like in the UK, I think a lot of us use PRS. So you have to register the song with PRS. You have to put in the metadata like correctly. So my name needs to be put in correctly. Your name does. And then with the record labels as well, the record label might not want to pay me directly. So basically the money for a song, especially in the world that we live in with streaming, I think is collected from lots of different places. And so there are different agencies like PRS, record labels.
Do they also take a cut?
Yes, they do. Distributors. There are performing rights societies. There are publishers. So I've just off the top of my head named 5, entities who will have a potential invested stake in a song. And so if it's your song and I've produced it and made the beat for it, but it is your song, it's a trust game really that you're going to register that song, or your team's going to register that song in the appropriate way. And then if registered appropriately and properly, the money should be distributed fairly on like a quarterly basis. And then if you perform that song, you should register with one of the right agencies that you've performed that song, and then you'll get more royalties for it and splits. Yeah. It's an interesting game, and I'm still learning, to be fair.
I mean, it's new. Streaming really only... Do you remember when Tidal was launched?
Yeah, but I never used it.
So Tidal was brought by a collection of music artists.
Yeah.
Jay-Z being one of them.
Yeah.
And I was on Tidal because he would deliberately take some of his albums off Apple Music.
Yeah.
And I remember Reasonable Doubt being one of my favorite albums, and Jay-Z just always removing it. I was like, I've got to get on Tidal.
Yeah.
In hindsight, I think a lot of these different platforms are the same. I just use Spotify now.
Yeah.